absolutely fabulous to have you here, and thank you so much for your time. Australian Health Professionals, what an incredible business. And I think it's really important if we can actually share this with the external world, because it's not just a recruitment company. And that's something that when I started delving into the actual business that I discovered. And I'd really like to, as I said, share that. So I suppose from the first point, what inspired the actual creation of the company initially?
Well, firstly, Jacqueline, thank you very much for facilitating this conversation and for having me along today. Very grateful for the opportunity. And, I see my role within the organisation as not given. I've spent the best part of 2 years working alongside our founder, Simon Thomas, in the aged care side of the business. We've done a significant amount of remodeling and repurposing of that business unit in order to get it aligned to the sector, the funding changes and everything else that's going on from a sort of macro perspective over that journey. And Simon, for reasons known only to him, saw it as an opportunity to take my skill set and to apply it to the broader group. So I'm here at his behest. The genesis of the organisation is interesting. Simon is a recruiter by profession and was working, once he had immigrated from the UK to Australia, was working very intensively in the aged care market, doing clinical placements on behalf of large organisations. And I think, like a lot of things AHP, the growth of the organisation has been somewhat opportunistic. In doing significant volumes of placement in clinical workforce in aged care, Simon saw firstly an opportunity to build his own practice, his own recruitment practice within that market and that space, but then subsequently worked out that if he was recruiting on behalf of others, that if he could employ a contingent workforce and leverage off the relationships that had been established in that market sector, to start doing work under contract with permanent employed staff under the banner of Australian Health Professionals. And the genesis of the other 5 entities within the AHP group has been much the same, and that's stemmed into a dedicated podiatry business, which is a very specific and very niche service delivery area within aged care itself, into the delivery of in-home community supports for people on the NDIS, utilising NDIS funding to deliver multidisciplinary allied health supports through our workforce. And then also the diversification of the recruitment from, allied health professionals into aged care, into allied health professionals, into all facets of the Australian healthcare market. And then supplementary to that, medical professionals from all corners of Australia and indeed all corners of the world into the Australian domestic, private and public markets. So the growth has been opportunistic, based on Simon having a particularly large risk appetite, an entrepreneurial streak that's a mile wide, and just being able to see opportunity and not putting up any guardrails to pursuing it, really. Just see work, win work, deliver on promise.
Yeah, and I think it's important here to actually highlight, just from that, some of those key points that I spoke to before, and that is, you're not just in medical, healthcare, allied services and disability. You also connect with wellness programs and services.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, and international nursing. It's an extraordinary bandwidth of services that you've actually got. And I haven't seen it before in a recruitment agency that has managed to actually scale not just out, but across into this diversification of services. So it's hats off. Like, I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. And clearly the people that are, you know, within the organisation, and including Simon at the head, have really been instrumental in making this happen. So I suppose we've identified like the groups that you actually serve.
Yes.
So what do you think sets your company apart from others? And if we can consider other aspects other than, of course, the fabulous range of services that you provide.
Well, I think really what sets us apart is our people. And I know that that's a story that's told by, you know, CEOs from across the sector and across, you know, across the broader Australian economic landscape. But we put a lot of trust in our divisional leads. We put a lot of faith in their ability to read the market, the headwinds, the tailwinds, to develop and implement the right strategy, subsequently to recruit and retain the right people to support them. And Simon and by proxy me, we have to be permissive about their ability to chase down opportunity as they see it within their market verticals. And I think what that's led to is an understanding of what's required from a workforce perspective and the ability of Australian tertiary institutions to turn out sufficient workforce to meet requirement across all facets of healthcare. I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that we need to bolster our stocks from international pool of talent, and we've been pretty quick to move on that. And I think, you know, the other side of that, you know, that same coin is that the healthcare landscape is evolving very quickly in Australia, and that, you know, reactive healthcare has been, you know, sort of the mainstay, but consumers are now have a very strong voice in proactive and preventative healthcare alongside that. We're seeing, you know, particularly in the aged market, as the boomer population starts to push through into retirement living and eventually will result in residential care, that the expectations of this consumer group are not the same as what's come before, and the focus around wellness, integrated services, you know, a focus on a healthier lifestyle, not necessarily just around longevity, but around improving the quality of life into old age has been something that we've been really, really passionate about delivering services alongside our strategic partners in that space. So, I mean, to summarise, we've seen the opportunity with international talent. We've seen the change in consumer expectations across, you know, age, disability, private, fee-for-service, healthcare. We've tried to the best of our ability, align the right talent to the right opportunity at every stage of the game. And the result is this very diverse, you know, very multifaceted business that's playing in a lot of new markets as a result.
Yeah, I think I do. I just think it's fabulous. And, you know, we talked a little bit, or you spoke a little bit about what your customers are now looking for. That's a big change, isn't it? You know, you even look back 5 years ago, and now the changes that's actually occurred in that 5-year period, and the expectations, as you say, boomers are in that space now. And
yes,
I'm at the very tail end of the boomers, and I understand that completely, because having a background in nursing, in which part of it was in psychiatric nursing and in aged care and in general practice, I see incredible changes that have occurred. So,
yeah, I think the you know, the consumer direct care approach and the consumer at the centre of supports has been a concept that's sort of evolved from maybe early deployment in certain facets of aged care support, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and has obviously been that mantle has been picked up and run with to a large extent with the rollout of NDIS services and the way that scheme's evolved since the days of trial sites. It's spilling over into, in-home support. It's spilling over into post-hospital discharge planning, rehabilitation, where consumer choice is at the forefront. And I think
fantastic.
And I think where we've been able to be successful in that space is that the culture within the organisation is to develop partnerships, not transactional relationships with our vendors. And because we have really open lines of communication with all of our strategic partners across all facets of our service delivery, sit there with a blank page and a pen and shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee with these partner organisations, we've been able to craft solutions that meet not only the consumer expectations but also the relationships with the large providers that we've got from across our panel, across our sector. And I think it's, like a lot of things in business, it's a case of adapt or perish. We have to be at the vanguard of some of these facets of service delivery and support. Otherwise, if we don't, our competitors will.
Absolutely. And I think too, for evolution of services and just understanding the underpinning requirements of those stakeholders just adds value and creates value for what you can offer them.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's intrinsic to AHP's DNA. I mean, that's certainly something that I picked up on from the very early days of working alongside Simon, both in previous role and current, that, the customer first approach, the partnership approach, the value add approach, the give back element associated with working with a large number of NFPs, the alignment on values, the alignment on strategic direction and an organisational mission. I think that's something that Simon has definitely imparted to each and every one of us that forms part of both his executive and his divisional management team. And long may that continue. I think it's fabulous.
No, absolutely. And in looking at the breadth of services and areas that you're involved in, how do you measure your quality or your ability to meet your customers' needs? Like what sort of measures do you have in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's sort of it's business unit specific, but the common thread is that we seek both qualitative and quantitative feedback from our partners. The qualitative feedback, is the customer satisfaction, the seeking feedback in real time around whether it's the placement of a nurse or the implementation of an aged care service into a home, the clear lines of communication that we foster at all levels of management, internally and externally, I think allows us to do that, to really measure the customer satisfaction side. And we've got a few internal metrics that we've deployed around that from group to group.
Yeah.
The quantitative measurements are defined by the regulatory environment with which we operate. The aged care market in particular is quite tightly regulated in residential care services. We have reporting requirements that are monthly, quarterly, that spill up into our partner organisations' reporting requirements back into, the aged care quality standards framework. So, in order to be effective in that space and in order to deliver on, customer expectation, you have to know your market. Same is true in disability, podiatry, recruitment, and all of the divisional leads have a really strong understanding of those regulatory frameworks that support service delivery in their vertical. So, knowing the market, knowing the expectations and delivering on those expectations is part of that that framework, part of AHP's DNA.
Yeah, very good. So then moving forward into employment.
Sorry,
I
might have to edit that part out.
But moving into employment and insights into employment, one of the things that I actually really enjoyed reading from the information that's actually on your website is that, finding the right candidate for the role, it's not just matching skills and experience, which tends to be the methodology for recruitment in most companies.
Yeah.
But your underpinning is the attitude, the ethics, and the values of the person actually coming into the business.
Yeah, wherever possible, that comes first. The values alignment is a huge piece of our internal recruitment drivers, and we try to impart that out to our partner relationships as well. I don't want to spend too much time talking through the stakeholder engagement side, but again, it's so important here to understand the expectations, whether it's a public hospital on a locum placement for a doctor, whether it's a permanent placement of an allied health professional, whether it's a contracted relationship in aged care, or whether it's an individual service support and disability. Understanding the expectations of the end user of our services, or the product that we're putting out into the market. Placing somebody or contracting a service is only going to work and be sustainable long term if you have a really clear picture of what the values and the principles of the organization that you're working with actually are. The only way that you can get to that framework is to have regular and clear dialogue with the organizations, because these things obviously change over time.
Yes.
And the relationship element there, again, is about sustainability, long-term partnership. It's not about transactional one-off placements. It's about doing the extra work to ensure that we're the first name picked when it comes to that next placement, that the customer experience, again, to the best of our ability.
And it's looking at understanding your customer and consistently being able to do that and meet their needs, because we all know that you will pick up the phone and call the person that can do that for you.
Yeah, and look, is that a perfectly executed game plan, and do we get it right 100% of the time? Absolutely not. Do we do our level best to make the customer experience valid, worthwhile? Do we always try and put the customer's expectations at the front of frame when we're doing a placement or implementing a contract? Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and I think health is such a dynamic market, and personnel changes and people changes are an inevitable part of that. The practical reality is that a lot of the people that we place, or the people that we work with in partner organisations, are in high demand, which means motility of workforce, and it means that relationships shift and people shift, and if you do a good enough job, the relationship goes with them. But at the very least, you have to work hard to ensure that the service standard for the next person into the role is met every single time. And I think we have a good framework for that. And I think that it's absolutely part of our business strategy to improve on that. Over the forward planning period, it's constant evolution and refinement of that customer strategy, and holding ourselves accountable to really trying to foster those relationships each and every time.
So on the other side of that, then you have the people applying to you for roles.
Yes.
That ultimately you provide to your clients. So what would you recommend for somebody who was wanting to put their best foot forward to actually engage with you and have good prospects of being employed? What would you recommend?
I think working with a recruiter, like any brokered relationship, it comes down to asking the right questions. So doing your research around the role, doing your research and being prepared around the sector expectations and trends, understanding the general job description and accountabilities of somebody at a given level that's going into a new role, what the likely expectations are for the employer, preparing yourself well for the discussion that's likely to follow from recruiter introductions to the point of interview, best representation of yourself and your skill set. I think honesty around your capabilities and, delivering on expectation, that integrity piece. I think it's also really important for candidates to be resilient. Like, not every conversation that you have is going to result in a yes. It's been in recent history something of a seller's market in terms of placement, but I think that will obviously evolve over time. Like, that's not always going to be the case. So managing your own expectations and working with your recruiter to get clear feedback around how you presented and what you've done to put your best foot forward is always a valid exercise. I think getting some professional assistance and guidance around development of your CV, and making sure that what you've got isn't cookie cutter, that it talks to your genuine skills and experience, whatever that is, and tries to draw, sort of relevance from any other adjacent past work history that might have an application in a healthcare setting, down the track.
That's very good advice, because you're right. The cookie cutter approach is something that you see quite frequently. And the ability of somebody to look into their past and have the ability to align past experiences with what's actually required in the new role is something that's really important, because, I'm not sure where you sit in the space of selection, etc. But I do know for myself, in past experience, you've got, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds. That's what you've got.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very quick process.
It goes all the way back to the clinical days for myself. I was taught by an early mentor that, the first, and best impression and the best chance of success with any new patient is in the waiting room. The approach, the courtesy that you show to the interviewer, the punctuality, all of those 1%ers that you can put, that you can do to put yourself in the best possible position for success. Show a willingness to learn. That growth mindset piece that's often touted amongst management staff it's popular for a reason. It's because it's important. Willingness and flexibility to learn the role and to draw parallels between what you're going for and relevant job history, I think, is just so important for any candidate that's looking for a new role.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And so, looking at the space you're in and, moving forward, what do you see are some of the industry changes that are going to evolve significantly in the next 3 to 5 years? If you were talking to your, future self, well, what do you think that you would say? How do people prepare?
I think the only way that you can prepare for the 3 to 5 year horizon in healthcare is to be flexible, show that growth mindset, willingness to sort of understand market change and trends. Because we play across such a diverse market, for me personally, that means understanding and learning about new facets of placement, recruitment. My native space is in service delivery and allied health. So I have to flex across and understand what the drivers are for procurement, for recruitment in a multitude of different health settings. And, I'm actually really enjoying that challenge.
Yeah.
But predicting what comes next, I think one of the trends that, is absolutely apparent is the consumer is at the center of support. And that regardless of whether you're talking to a large organization, you need to consider, and regardless of whether you're talking about individual recruitment or embedded services or contracted services, locum placement, it's understanding that that consumer first, that patient first ethos. How can we better integrate into, the tech elements that are increasingly driving good quality healthcare? The role of, information systems and clarity of information communication across disciplines, across markets is going to be increasingly important. Understanding the funding changes, the role of both federal and state governments in ongoing healthcare provision, where the private market intercedes in that, and how that adapts and evolves over the next 5 years is going to be a very interesting space to watch, alongside the sort of synergies between public health and private health providers, and how they can work more collaboratively and what opportunities that creates, both from a service delivery perspective, from our perspective, but also a placement perspective for candidates that are in the market. I think a really clear understanding of your role within the health sector is important for a successful placement. That will always be true. But then, our abiding ethos is, be useful. How else can you be useful across the space, and where can you collaborate? And where does that add value, both in terms of your role and prospects of future employment? Look, I know that's a very roundabout answer. It's a very big question. It's one that you sort of draw breath on prior to answering, because I think the only real certainty in the Australian health market over the next 3 to 5 years is change, and the requirement to be adaptable to that change and resilient to that change is going to be absolutely intrinsic to anyone entering into a healthcare role.
But I think the keys there, that adaptability and being flexible, it's becoming more and more evident in many different industries. But as you say, particularly in this industry. And I suppose, where do you see educators sitting amongst this? What do you believe, if you could paint a picture of how education would interact with you as a company, so that you would get the best out of graduates coming through as potential recruitees, how would you like education providers to interact with you?
Well, I think that there's a role for partnership between, institutional learning and non-institutional learning, like colleges, etc., and tertiary institutions all the way through to university, to form stronger sector partnerships, both with private and public organisations. In many respects, the traditional approach has been to partner with, government agency and work on curriculum that's built around sort of job readiness for roles within the public space, public hospital in particular. But I think graduates in nursing, allied health, medicine need to be increasingly prepared for a future where their career is in the private space. And I think organisations like us can work with education providers at all levels to provide exposure for student populations to what it's like in the real world. What it's like working outside the confines of a public institution, and how the guardrails are similarly applied in terms of good quality service and being safe and mitigating risk, ensuring customer, patient first approach is still applied. Seeing how organisations like us form sector partnerships and build our own networks for referral and collaboration across health in all its guises. More exposure to, on-the-job learning, whether that's observational or, you know, under supervision, I think that there's a great potential for private organisations to augment the available placement opportunities for a lot of tertiary institutions.
Yeah, that's
and
fantastic.
you know, we have absolute willingness to partner in that space and to do more. I think I won't say it's been a low priority for us in the past. It's not true. We've certainly done it, but, you know, formalised, you know, relationships with organisations across all facets of education in the health space is something that we'd be ready, willing, and able to explore in more detail.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic, because it's very important for educators to be able to put themselves into that space with you and ensure that what they're actually delivering to their students, the curriculum, the experiences, etc., align with what's required in industry. And sometimes I believe that gets lost in translation. So yeah, it's very important.
Oh, it's a tough line that you guys walk. You know, you've got to meet you've obviously got to meet the regulatory requirements and the learning requirements of the courses that you're delivering, simultaneously preparing graduates for roles in sector. You know, it is only going to come about by looking at every possible location for these graduates to be placed. And, you know, once they leave the four walls of your institutions, you can only do that through sector partnership. And I think that's increasingly relevant and valid. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Anthony Moore from Australian Health Professionals, it's been absolutely wonderful to share this with you today, and I've had the privilege of sitting with you before and discussing these topics at length, but now having this available to the broader community to get some insights, particularly into your businesses and the verticals of the business, is just absolutely brilliant. I can't tell you how valuable this will be for them, and also probably for your competitors. So,
look, our competitors notwithstanding, you know, the approach from our side is that we would rather work with organisations from across all facets of the sector than work against people. The practical reality is that health in all its guises in Australia is a massive market. We have a role to play in, you know, in filling staff vacancies, in providing locum support, in delivering on contracted services, aligning to expectations for aged and people on the NDIS within the community, you know, to try and provide as much support as we can across all of those sectors. But we're one organisation in a very, very large, you know, a very, very large market. Obviously, we're looking to grow and expand our presence within each of those market verticals, but, you know, for us, collaboration is king, and hopefully that's the abiding message from, you know, from today's discussion, is that we're open to collaboration and partnership in all its forms, whether competitive or whether it's looking at an opportunity in a sector, or developing a new product or service line, or you know, a new approach to the way that these services are rendered on behalf of the partner organisations or the end user. We're open to collaboration in all its forms. So if nothing else, I hope that message rings true.
I believe it will. And, you know, I'll just go back to the beginning and say, you know, the diversity of the business that you have and the areas that you lean into, the collaboration that you have, the deep consideration for stakeholders, you truly have an amazing company, and it truly is in a leading role in Australia. And so, you know, from our perspective, you know, Australian Health Professionals, they are leaders in this space. So I just want to thank you again for your time.
No, thank you, Jacqueline. The pleasure's all mine. And look, honestly, we really appreciate the opportunity to, you know, to talk about us and, to share some of the insights today, and, look forward to a long working relationship together.
I can guarantee you of that.